And this is Durjoy, and we are united by a love for love. And the topic I think today was talking about fire and rapid fire. The assumption being that a certain amount of chilies are always infused into our writing. I think so. That's where maybe the fire element comes from. So I'm going to just shoot the first question, and the whole idea of this conversation was that we would keep shooting questions at each other and make this a rapid fire to see us through the next hour or so. So I'm going to shoot this question at Durjoy, saying that when we're writing romance, so much of it seems to be completely enmeshed with the fact that there has to be a lot of sparks and fire that is part of that whole journey in romance. And what's that been like for you, Durjoy? From the time you started, and I think you have some 17 or 18 books out till now, right?
I'm 21. So I've been writing for 15 years, and when I wrote my first book, I did not know that I was a romance writer because for the longest time my parents were dictating the kind of books that I was supposed to read. So romance as a genre did not exist for me. So the maximum they would go out, so they would read the book themselves and then give it to me and then tell me that okay, now you can read it. So even thrillers with too much intimacy wasn't allowed. So when I wrote the book and my publisher told me, okay, yeah, this is a romance book, we are going to sell it as a romance book. I was like, what? So, but when the book came out and I realized that, okay, this is how you sell the books. I have always considered myself as a drama writer. So what I write stories around big, dramatic plot points. And that as a genre does not exist. You do not have a drama genre in a bookstore. They told me that you're a romance writer. So then I started to look at my writing from that point of view. That okay, what is romance in my book? My first book was named Of Course I Love You Till I Find Someone Better. Now it feels very funny to say it out loud as a 37-year-old, but when I was 21 it was very cool. It was like a funny little inside joke that you sent each other, right? But when my first book was getting published, I was very thankful that it was getting published. So I did not care about anything else. But my publisher was a deeply superstitious person. So he was like, we only publish books that have 19 characters. So we need a title that has 19 characters and it also has a subtitle. So I was like, okay, let me just. So one of the dialogues of the book was, of course I love you, and then the character thinks till I find someone better. So I was like, yeah, let's keep it. And then, no, this is not 19, this is 16. I was like, what if we do ... exclamation mark? So that is why my first book is of course I love you ... exclamation mark 19 characters and then comes till I find someone better. So that was my first book. And I think she was just asking me a little bit earlier that there are some other writers who write a lot about sex and intimacy, and do you do that? And now I can say I don't do that, because in my first book, half the book is that. And that is something that has changed over the years, because when I was writing my first book, I wrote my first book from the ages of 18 to 21, and that was the only thing I was thinking about. So, writers say that, you write about what you know, and that is the only thing I knew. So I wrote that book, and for the next 3, 4, 5 years, I kept writing in that sort of fashion, till the time a lot of criticism started coming to me saying that, Durjoy, the only reason why a book sells is because you write a lot of scenes about intimacy. And although that was true, I was like, no. I reject that criticism and I can sell my books even if I don't write about intimacy. I can still sell it. And so I wrote a book which is called Till the Last Breath, which has zero intimacy, right? There's not even a a couple has been in a relationship for 10 years, they will not kiss in the book. They can do whatever they want to do in their private spaces. It's not happening in my book. So I wrote that book and that book sold. And I was like, yes, now I can do this. Now people will take me seriously. It hasn't happened in the last 15 years, but in my head I was like, okay, now this has happened. So since that time, so that year was 2013 and this is 2022, 23. I have been relatively smut free. But then someone pointed out this to me last year that your characters are becoming very old. That they are just getting into a relationship, and how are they thinking these deep feelings when they should be thinking about intimacy? And then I realized, oh, now I have gotten old and I am not thinking about it that often. So I mean, I don't know what your question was, but this is where I went with it.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in with my journey, which has been different, in fact, quite opposite yours.
Yeah, so I want to introduce. So she wrote a Mills and Boots book, something that I have been accused of, that you write Mills and Boots. And I know my books are not hot enough. But her first book was Lavasana, which she wrote, which was a Mills and Boots thing, but then she rewrote it and made it into Lavasana.
No, the
revised
version came out as Head Over
So,
Heels.
yeah.
But the funny thing is that when I wrote the first book, which made me the first Indian Mills and Boon author, and it got a lot of attention. It was all over the media, and I was actually, not expecting any of it. I had a bad anniversary night, and I had 2 margaritas, and wrote a short story and entered it in a contest, which went on to win, but didn't come with the contract. And so I actually went through a long process with the editors in UK, and arriving at what is this book going to be about. And in that interim period, there was a lot of media attention on what is this book going to be about. So there was one particular time I remember I was on an interview on BBC with a person called Penny Jordan, who had been the romance queen worldwide. And there was this lady called Jenny Murray who ran something called Radio 4 for BBC and still does. And she had interviewed everybody from the Queen then to the Queen the band. And there I was the newbie, like I was the new kid on the block writing romance, and there was all these big weights. And I remember at one time they had even got somebody to dramatize a scene from the short story. So they told me, they said, oh, that looks very hot, so can we expect more of the same in the book? And at that time I remember, and I said, I had written this story on impulse. But now I was a woman at that time in her 40s. So unlike you writing in your 20s, I realized that both my kids are teenagers. And if I write anything, I don't want my kids to get bullied in school. I didn't have the freedom I felt. I didn't give myself the freedom at that time to put the burden of my choices is saying, okay, even if I can write something very hot, I don't want to do that. I don't want my kids to pay the price for what I do. So at that time when I wrote the Love Asan, I remember at that time saying that if this was a Chinese menu and we had to put, the number of chilies on it when you say how spicy is this dish, I'm saying I'm going to put it like moderately spicy, But later, the interesting thing was in the pandemic, actually, I had done a long journey from that book, and in the last 12 years, when I decided I'm not writing Mills and Bones, I want to write books which are much in my voice and more true to India, and bringing in a lot of the Indian humor and the way the dynamics of relationships go, which is with a lot of other relationships. So with something like, say, Mills and Bones, it's always only about the hero and the heroine. But when we look at romance in India, when we look at it, we say there are so many other dynamics that are going to come into it. And so I actually took back the rights in 2019 and rewrote and republished that book as something called Head Over Heels, which is available on Amazon. And then the fun thing was that I could completely rewrite even my heroine. It wasn't just about rewriting scenes, but I could rewrite the heroine with a lot more agency. Because when that book came out first in 2010, there I was dictated by Harlequin and Mills and Boone, and you're writing within a franchise, and you're writing within a genre. So you're writing whatever the dictates of genre are. There are certain boundaries that you must Still, you can bend it, but you can't break it. But I was still writing within those boundaries and within the fact that this is Harlequin Mills and Boone and there's an expectation from it. But with Head Over Heels, I could have a heroine when the guy is trying to put her into a marriage of convenience. She says, "What the hell do you think you're up to?" And this is in the post Me Too context. So she says, "I'm going to go out, I'm going to tell the media what you just suggested to me." You know, so the fun has been in re-exploring everything. And in my context, just to bring it back to Spice and Fire, I could now say I want to write women who are able to take the lead in terms of, and not be coy, not be waiting for that guy to make the moves or whatever. So I could write heroines with much more agency in every aspect, including in sex.
One side question: do kids get bullied about what their parents write in school?
I think so.
Because that's an important question that we need to answer.
Think about it, Durjoy. As your kids get older, you may find that,
No, so I've always found a lot of comfort in the fact that, so a lot of reasons why I don't get trolled in general, while there's a lot of stuff in my books that I should get trolled about on social media, is because people would have to read an entire books to troll you. And people don't want to do that. So I have been relaxing in the comfort that even if someone wants to troll my daughters, they will have to buy my book, read the entire book, read 20, by that time 30 books, and then start to troll me. That's too much effort.
I think it was only because it was in the context of the fact that that particular book was the first Indian Mills and Boone, and there was a lot of attention on it. Because every woman, and there were generations who had grown up reading Mills and Boone and reading about Spanish, royalty and counts and, all of that, dukes and duchesses. So there was a lot of attention that was going to be focused on it. I didn't want it to get diverted. If I was going to...
Yeah, I remember the time Harlequin came to India, so Mills and Boone's big romance brand came to India in 2010. And it had been just 2 years that I was writing books. Couple of my books had come out, and everyone was like, okay, Indian romance has no place in the market because Mills and Boons is coming in and it's going to wipe out the market, etc., etc. And then that was the first time I read Mills and Boons for the first time. And I was like, there is only one guy, Mills and Boons guy, in this entire country, which is who's a cross between Shah Rukh Khan and Hrithik Roshan. So Mills and Boons, in the longer run, cannot. It's very unreal.
I think
it's a dearth of hot guys.
I think it's like they know what they're doing, and the only thing was I knew what I'm doing, which is that I'm breaking away. So I wrote that first book and I managed so it's like I said, I started by saying that it's like a franchise, they sell like a book every 7 seconds or something, a romance book. And so they know what works for them. But for me, the excitement was, if I'm going to be the first, I want to try and push the envelope. I want to make sure I get more of the Indian thing. So I was having fun writing, even if I was writing honey stuff, which was part of it. Okay, let's say that, even if I look at the Indian context, it's like when we have a Mehndi ceremony and the initials of the man are put into the woman's, Mehndi design. It's to break the ice on the wedding night, because you had a history of arranged marriages. It gave the guy a context to get closer. He would come and then he had to hunt for his initials in her hand, in the Mehndi. So there was still an Indianness that I could bring into it. Which was what I wanted to do, but it was also again about taking interest. And I think we'll get into the next question, which is that a lot of us write about things that interest us, so we'll keep bringing it in. So for example, for me with the Love Asan, I thought of that title when I was in the middle of a yoga class and I was bored to death. And that instructor was going on and on, and I kept thinking, before I'd even written that story, I kept thinking, I said, imagine if there was actually a more interesting teacher, who that whole class would suddenly become so interesting, and that's where it came from. Or in my latest book, which is Our Song, it's because of my obsession with music and wanting to write a character who is so obsessed with music that actually speaking other things don't really have a place in her life so much. They don't. Romance is definitely not one central story. And I think in your latest book, you've also brought in characters who are into crypto and so let's talk about what are the things that we are interested in and that we want to bring into our writing.
It's first of all, congratulations for our songs, our
Thank you,
song.
thank you.
And I just want to ask a small question that are you obsessed with music enough to write about it? Because a lot of times I find myself, okay, I think I know enough about this, but when I start writing about it, I'm like, no, I don't know enough. So I cannot put my character as a subject matter expert. So like they were talking about Chinaman, I'm, I
You're
watch,
into cricket in a big way.
I watch every kind of cricket, but cannot write about
I've been
cricket
reading all about the matches you lose.
yeah. But when I start writing about cricket, I'm like, I don't know about it enough. So when you were writing our song, did you feel that maybe I need to know a little bit more?
You know, for me, Our Song, in fact, is a book that I had plotted out almost 10 years ago because I had a very deep interest in music. I did my Visharat, from Allahabad and from Prayag Sangeet Samiti and all that. So I had the core knowledge, but I'm not a practicing musician. But I could and I've had a couple of musician friends, like even Shubha Mudgal when she was at the start of her career, because I've had a parallel career in advertising, and so for me, I think a long time ago, I was actually when Shubha Mudgal, I would take the liberty of not even adding G because I've known her long enough and she insists I don't add Shubha Mudgal G to it. Or say somebody like Ricky Cage, who's now a 3-time Grammy Award winner. They've been friends who I have known from their struggling days. So, in a very distant way, I would have traveled that journey a little bit. I've used them, let's say, in advertising when we record a jingle, when you're doing a scratch. Can you imagine? So, using a scratch voice is Shubha. So, you know what it takes, and that's became the basis of the story in our song, where there's a person who wants to do her own kind of music, but you're forced to do commercial music till, to pay your bills. So, there I had enough, say, base of knowledge. But for example, if somebody says, why haven't you attempted writing an LGBTQI love story? I say, I can't do it because I haven't lived that experience. So no matter what research I do, I would still feel like a fraud if I try to write something which is, I think it's important to come from that lived experience in that example.
I think I have had different experiences with writing about characters that I don't know intimately about. So Till the Last Breath came out in, I don't know, 2012 or something, and it is set in a hospital, and I'm writing about two main characters who are doctors, and all of my research was light googling and this television show called House. And I was like, yeah, I know
Everybody
enough.
lies, you lie too.
Yeah, I was like,
as House says.
yeah, and I know enough about these doctors. So what if they have studied 10 years? I have done a lot of googling now. I know everything about them. But now I think if I have to write about a doctor now, I would not do it. I would be so scared of doing it that okay, I'll get so many things wrong. But I think that's the beauty about being young. You can be a little more courageous and be stupid and not care about it. So, but when I'm with you, it's about parenthood, something that I've lived through, and I live a lot through it because you don't get enough sleep. So, when I'm with you came at a time when so my daughter was I think 3 or 4, and I realized that a lot of people have their careers destroyed by their children. I mean, absolutely decimated. And it's not like those guys are best parents either. I mean, just because I'm parenting my kid doesn't mean that I know how to do it. I'm like, for say something like engineering, I studied for 4 years. And I went to a college, got a degree, etc., etc. I did a kid without thinking. I was like, yeah, I learned on the job. I did not, and it's a 18-year project, right? You have to raise your kid right from your infancy to the time hopefully they stand on their feet and crack some entrance examination. Right till that point, you have to take care of that kid, and you have no preparation at all, like zero. That's the level of arrogance that you have. हाँ parenthood हमारे parents ने भी कर लिया था हम भी कर लेंगे. The fact of the matter.
I've often thought there should be a license issued. And like I actually once thought of a title, something like Mummy Daddy Pastimes. You got to say, I've cleared that before I can even go there and procreate.
I have also thought about that, and there's a problem regarding that as well. because no matter in every second video that I put of my kid online, someone or the other points out this is how you're doing parenting wrong, and sometimes they are like 18-year-old kids telling me you should not, she should not sit like this, she should not eat like this, she should not burp like this. so so I realized that it should be left to professionals, and my sister is settled in Sweden, and daycare is intense there, right? So your kid is not supposed to be your kid is supposed to be your friend as soon as possible, and daycare is supposed to take care of that. So she used to drop in her kid at the daycare at 6 in the morning, pick her up at 6 in the evening. So your effective parenting is 3 hours a day. Rest of the time is taken care of by a professional. Like if you have a 1-year-old kid, that kid should know how to use a spoon. हमारे में I was getting fed by my mother when I was 17. So I realized that, and you know there is a lot of cost that you pay for this attitude, and it generally comes in terms of women's careers, right? We usually get married where the guy is earning more than the guy, than the girl, and when you have a kid, the girl has to step back a little. And now her career is gone for the next 3, 4, 5 years. For what? At 6 years of age, your child is reasonably autonomous, right? So 5 years of your career is just gone. And in my case, it was me. Although I chose it because, you know, in my case, one of my core values of life is not to work hard. It is like I want to take it easy. I mean, क्या मिल जाएगा इतना काम करके? So in my case, I stepped back, but I realized that a lot of women around me, people who were like scoring better than me in school and college, in MBAs, have genuinely just turned into mothers. And I was getting a lot of social clout in being an involved father. I mean, I could put up anything with my kid and they'll be like, wow, what a good father. and my classmates, they could put up cute videos with their children, they'll be like, oh, you are doing this is wrong. so I'm like, this is not supposed to be done by us. This is supposed to be done by professionals, and then we are parents, then we'll, you know, do the other stuff. That is where When I'm With You came in, that, you know, what if we had a robust daycare system in India where, you know, women don't have to sacrifice their entire careers because they have had a kid.
I'm going to bring us back right now to a discussion you were having just before we came in here in terms of, you know, whose point of view do you end up writing from, and you know, you said interestingly that you are often narrating from the female point of view. You know, how do you get into that?
So this question about masculinity and femininity, however that's pronounced, femininity, yeah, it's something that I've grappled with a lot of for a long time. Because for the last 5-6 years I've been at home taking care of kids, etc., etc. And some TV producer told me, oh, because you are in touch with your feminine traits, that's why you are at home, etc. And and the same person used to tell me that the only reason why you can't write guy-centric stories is because you are in touch with your feminine traits of staying at home, etc. And then I sort of, ये 50 साल का आदमी मुझे बोल रहा है, maybe he's right, I don't know that.
It would be a good thing.
I mean, I was like, yeah, this is fine. And then I started searching about it, and I did not search about femininity and masculinity. I searched that why can't I write masculine shows? And then I realized that most boys don't turn into men, and that's why I don't relate with them. So girls are forced to turn into women, and they're forced to turn into better characters. So when you are 13, you bleed, you become a woman. Then people start looking at you at a certain way and start treating you as a grown-up, you become a woman. Then you are told that now you are a woman, now you have to behave like this. So, you know, you have no choice but to grow up. Whereas boys, You can have 5 kids, you can have a great job, you can turn 50 and you can still end up being a boy. You hear this word called man child so often. You never,
Particularly in India, I think.
yeah, and you never
When,
hear woman girl. It does not exist. Whereas most men, they are still boys, and I don't feel relatable. I cannot relate with their experience. So this is what my wife said, that Durjoy, you're a boy, but you do a lot of man things. What you have done is that, so the masculine trait is that you find a problem and you try to solve it, which is negative and both positive, because when your wife is telling you about her experience, you're trying to solve that problem when you're supposed to listen. But the masculine trait is trying to solve that problem. So what you have figured out your problem is that, okay, now we have 2 kids and both of us need to manage our careers. How do we do that? You have considered that as a problem and you are trying to solve it. It's not a feminine trait, it's a masculine trait of trying to solve a problem. Like, yeah. This is why I cannot write masculine, because what will 2 boys talk about? Because they will keep talking
for
about
me
girls.
also, I think the interesting thing was, when I looked at my previous books, in the last 10 years, I was always looking at the character arc. Obviously, you're going to look at both, but particularly for me, it was the emphasis was in terms of more the woman and her emotional journey. And this time in our song, what I found, a great challenge to do was to actually say, what if I had a woman who's already been through her struggles and she has arrived at a place where she's become a little bit cynical about love, and because music has filled up such a big place in her life, and that's where she lost, let's say, her family and so on, because she chose to break away and she challenged the patriarchy of proper Hindustani gharana wala music. And so I have a character who's arrived in Bangalore, and she's struggling, but she's very sorted. And there's one line in the book which says, people will leave, even the good ones do, the music will stay. And this is what Ragini believes, that people can come and go, the music is her mainstay. But the hero is a guy who has actually been emotionally very regressed, and he comes from a background where people have just not tackled some of the underlying issues. And so for me, the fun was actually in getting into saying, how do I get this guy to break out of that, that you're outwardly the man, you're a corporate successful guy, you're taking big decisions and all that, but you've actually not resolved any of your your inner issues about even being vocal about your emotions and things. So I think it's interesting how we've done a gender switch in our writing in that sense.
I think
Rapunzel, who I remember reading somewhere that there was a version that said Rapunzel was actually pregnant and then confined to the tower. It was supposed to be a cautionary tale, to not allow somebody to seduce you. That became that's why Rapunzel was put up in that tower. Instead, at least we have now popular cinema like Frozen, which is showing and saying, what, you fell in love with the first man who kissed you? I remember there was a line there, and it's not about a man coming to save you, but in fact you coming to save yourself. So I take hope for all of that, because at the end of the day, there has to be some change that is happening where we also kind of plug into that and push it. Would you agree, Tushar?
Yeah, of course. There's this. I'll just end. It's not my thought, but there's a research that went around amongst divorcees and widowers and widows, and they found out that widows and women divorcees, they were less likely to look for a serious relationship after their first has crashed and burned, because they do not want to take care of they do not want to become a mother again to a guy who's their same age. Whereas guys, once they have lost their wife to divorce or death, they just wanted to get into a relationship right then, because they are so used to being taken care of. So that's I mean, it's everyone has seen that happen a lot of times. But yeah, and I was watching not the new one, the older one, The Little Mermaid, And the last scene, the father comes in, he's turned into a weed, and he turns into a god-like person, and he gives the mermaid that power to give legs. And my first question in my head was, is this like optional? Like you can turn into a mermaid if you want to, or is this legs like a final thing? This is so stupid. This guy, why are you turning into like a person? Because all your friends are in the sea, and now you'll have to
That we
get
don't
into.
miss the fact that it's the father who comes and gives that power.
And
I
was
would
like,
have a quarrel with that also.
yeah,
Who is he to come in? That man giving the power to the woman.
I mean, I was like, if you have to meet your friends, you have to get into a submarine, and submarines are not safe anymore.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it open for questions because I saw the fact that we're running short on time. So, will somebody pass a mic? There's a girl in blue there. Yeah.
Hello ma'am and hello sir. I would like to ask question to the sir. So what is the greenest flag you can find in a man, according to you? I'm not going to ask a feminine answer from a female because we have our own stereotypes with green flags. But I would like to ask you, what are the green flags you would like to find in a man?
I would like to find no green flags, but that answer has changed over the years. Like right now, I would say this is another statistic that in the US, more divorces happen because of the unequal distribution of domestic chores than because of infidelity. Which basically says if your man washes your clothes, even if he's cheating, stay with him. so, one of the biggest green flags is if you can find a guy who has a very young sibling. Because if you're planning to have kids, I'm telling you, it's going to be very difficult if your guy isn't present. Or find a guy who's very okay with being bored. I mean, it's fine. I don't want to do anything today. I stay with the kids, etc., etc. Those are, for me right now, those are the green flags.
Lady in pink here.
Hello, hi. Thank you for the lovely session. My question to both of you is, with the genre that you write in, how do you make sure that what you write doesn't get repetitive for your readers? I mean, how do you come up with a fresh story each time so that your readers don't dismiss it as just another romance novel?
No, I don't even think there would be a conscious thought about that because you're not going to want to tell the same story again. And I think that we've also been, seeing that we're changing and we're evolving. So for me, there has been a reverse engineering that's been going on from the time I started. And even in his case, whether it was, and also even the fact that we're thinking through and saying, do we want to write from a place of what we know, or do we want to look and explore and research something further? So you would never want something that feels even slightly similar to what you wrote. So I would hope there's no danger of that.
Also, Shihan was asked this question just like an hour ago that you're from Sri Lanka. Does it make you want to write about war books because people expect that out of you? And can writers of Sri Lanka write about anything else than, say, the war? And he was like, no, people write science fiction all the time. Or they are writing murder mysteries, right? Because every book is different by design. So even if I'm writing two romances, there are hundreds and thousands of romance books. I mean, if I start reading every one of them, I'll never be able to write my own because every book I come to it with a different point of view. I've grown up, I've seen more things, and I've thought of a new character. So I come to it with that attitude. And I think very few writers start writing thinking about what their audience would want to read. Most of them come to the laptop thinking that, okay, I want to write a book that I really want to write because that's the only way how you will devote a year of your life to that. If you keep thinking about this audience, that audience that is swiftly changing, might or might not like you after a year, you will be paralyzed into inaction. So the only way to write a book is to write a book that you would want to read.
Yeah. Hi Durjoy. My question is very general. This is your third time in Mysuru, if I'm not wrong, and I was there for the last 2 meetings too. So, top 3 things in Mysuru that you find really interesting.
Top first is Chamundi temple and this thing that I get there. This is the only red dhaga in this entirety of the country which does not lose color once you wash your hands, etc. So it's an absolute must get. Second is the weather. I don't know whether this is the weather all year around because it's brilliant. No. Stop saying that. So I live in Dubai, so this weather is absolutely acceptable. And the third is that it's green, which is like a subpart, and it's also a little bit stuck in time, in the sense of what it looks like, not in the attitude, etc. But the way it looks like, it sort of gives you that, like when you see people who go to Europe and they say quaint and old world charm. In a lot of this is the problem with India, that everything is so constructed because everything is so new that if you have to say that, okay, what would it look like 50 years ago, you have no picture in your head, right? And now they're even breaking down, they have broken down the entire Delhi stuff also. So when you come to Mysore, you have a fair idea, okay, so this is how it must look like. So I think that old world thing, I think that's what I really like. But of course, weather. And this.
I'd like to round off this session